Great. We all set?
We are all set.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good evening. I am calling this public hearing to order. In accordance with the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act, MGLC, 131, Section 40, and the Boston Wetlands Ordinance, Boston City Code Ordinances, Chapter 7-1.4, the Boston Conservation Commission will hold a virtual public meeting this evening on January 3rd, 2024, to review the following projects to determine what conditions, if any, the commission will impose in order to protect the interest of the public and private water supply, groundwater, prevention of pollution, flood control, prevention of storm damage, protection of fisheries and land containing shellfish, and protection of wildlife habitat. This evening's hearing will be followed by our regular meeting. And then in accordance with Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, we are conducting this meeting online. To ensure the public access to the deliberations of the Conservation Commission, the public may access this call through telephone and video conferencing. Additionally, this meeting is being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, please turn off your video. Members of the public may have an opportunity to ask questions and provide public comment on applications and discussions. To do so, please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself. Send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov or via Twitter, now known as X, by tagging the Twitter handle @BostonEnviro and using the hashtag ConComHearing. For the record, I am Michael Parker, Chair of the Commission. Could staff who are present please identify themselves?
Elena Itamari with the Environment Department.
Dee Dee Hernandez with the Environment Department.
Christopher?
And Christopher's mic isn't working, but
Got
he
it.
put it in the chat.
Okay. Call the roll of commissioners present. Commissioner Sullivan?
John Sullivan.
Commissioner Long?
Nick Long.
Commissioner Wilson?
Mike Wilson.
Commissioner Conan?
Conan Thiruvengadam.
Commissioner Richmond?
Alice Richmond.
Commissioner Herbst?
Ann Herbst.
Great, thank you. Okay, want to note that the first item on the agenda, notice of intent for DEP file number 0061973 and Boston file number 2023-063 from Fort Point Associates on behalf of the Esplanade Association for the proposed construction of a new welcoming destination located at 280 Charles Street in the West End of Boston, with a resource area of 25-foot riverfront and waterfront, and 100-foot buffer to bank. The proponent has asked for a continuance. So with that, I would entertain a motion to continue the hearing.
So moved.
So moved.
Commissioner Sullivan made his first and only motion of the year.
And also an appearance.
Here we go. He lives, we know. Okay. Okay, so with that, Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson.
Aye.
Commissioner Conan,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
Aye.
Commissioner Herbst,
Aye.
and I vote aye. That carries 7-0. Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is notice of intent for DEP file number 0061974 and Boston file number 2023-065 from VHB on behalf of Boston Public Schools Facilities Management for the proposed improvements to the playground of the Umana Academy located at 312 Border Street in East Boston. Resource areas are land subject to coastal storm flowage and 100-foot buffer to bank. Who's here on behalf of the applicant?
I am. This is Stephanie Carroll at VHB.
Good evening.
I am not sure if there are others.
Well, you're enough.
Well, thank you.
I'm sure you can handle this.
Okay, great. Yep. I'm happy to begin.
Great.
Okay, so this project is, as Chair Parker said, the Mario Umana Academy Playground expansion. Next slide, please. And I'm just going to give a project overview, talk about existing conditions in wetland resource areas, describe the work and the mitigation members, and then demonstrate regulatory compliance. Next, please. So the purpose of this project is to expand the existing playground by adding structures so that there's accessible play structures for children of all abilities. It also includes installation of a new permeable rubber surface around that equipment. The entire project site is within land subject to coastal storm flowage and the 100-foot buffer to coastal bank. We have looked at stormwater, and the new surface will allow for stormwater management. It'll reduce runoff, it'll promote groundwater recharge, and we've really minimized the land disturbance by staying within the fenced area that's immediately adjacent to the playground. Next slide, please. So this image just indicates that the project site is entirely within LSCSF. It's about 3/4 of an acre. It lies in East Boston. The site is generally pretty flat, and that's why the floodplain goes inland so far. And of course, we did confirm that all of the area is actually below the BFE, not just shown on the FEMA firms. Next slide, please. So the work will involve the removal of the existing grass and installation of the playground equipment. And then the permeable rubber playground surface will be added to that. It'll be well drained. The stormwater report, the description of the stormwater was included in the NOI. It'll impact permanently about 8,473 square feet, and that will be filling within the floodplain. Next slide, please. Mitigation will consist of ENS control barriers. There's already fencing along the 3 sides of the limit of work. There'll be construction fencing around the entire area. There'll be catch basin protection and cleaning. There's one catch basin that is it's within the limit of work, which we identified as the entire area where there will be equipment, not just where it will be actually impacting the LSCSF. And there is one catch basin within that area. We'll include all of the typical stabilization of vehicular access points. We will remove construction equipment in advance of a predicted 1% annual chance coastal flood event. They'll also be doing offsite monitoring, street sweeping, and then of course, spill prevention, post-construction, stormwater plan. And I would like to note that we will be maintaining the existing flow patterns. Next slide, please. So as you know, there are no performance standards yet under the WPA, but we did apply the performance standards for redevelopment project under the local ordinance. There are no significant changes to the elevation of the land. There will be fill, but it is all within, I believe, 2 feet of the existing surface. There's no changes to the drainage pattern. The site is in a A zone, not a VE zone or an AH zone, so there won't be any wave action or ponding anticipated. And then within the buffer of the bank, of course, the bank here is composed of the seawall that was constructed for the purpose of land making, we think in the 70s. So the project the project limit is just over 25 feet from the coastal bank, and it won't have any impact on the stability of the bank. We did have a chance to review the draft order of conditions, so thank you to the folks in the Environment Department for reviewing that for us, and we are fine with what is currently proposed. And that is the end of my presentation.
Great, thank you. Stephanie, just a quick couple of questions here.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the reduction of 80% TSS, it was unclear to me how you're accomplishing that. I know you talked about the 6-inch drainage layer with the 3/4 inch bluestone. How do you know for sure that you're removing 80%?
I don't have the details on that. I can request some additional information from the engineer.
Okay. Okay.
Excuse me, we do have, this is Michael Clutchman.
Hi, Michael. I did not know you were on.
Landscape architect from VHB. And I also saw that we have our civil engineer, Joseph Stanko from Lero on the call. So maybe Lero, Joseph, you might be able to answer that question.
Hi, everybody. The TSS removal, the TIP surface is a permeable surface, so there is going to be filtration that's going through that. And we're utilizing majority of infiltration practices through that and through the bluestone prior to it entering into the system.
Okay, but how do you know, as a metric or a measurement, how do you know that you're removing that, or you're reducing it to 80, whatever the term is? How do you know you're meeting the goal?
I could check the spec for the permeability of the surface and review that and get back to you if that's.
Okay, yeah, I don't think it needs to hold anything up at this point, but if you could get that to staff, that would be good. Okay, thank you. And Stephanie, you mentioned an O&M plan. Was that in the filing?
Let me check.
If it's not, we'd want to have it. That's my only comment.
Sure. Let's see. Yeah, I am not sure if it's in here. Yeah, we can
if I
certainly
missed
provide it as a condition, no problem.
Yep, perfect. Okay, good. That's it for me. Eleanor, what do you have on this?
Yeah, so we'd actually had a chance to do our pre-hearing site visit, and there were just a few things that we noted. So we chatted while we were on site about the color of the playground surface to ensure that it's a lighter color and less heat absorbing. So maybe including that as a condition. My understanding is that was already part of the plan, but I don't believe it was explicitly mentioned. And we also noticed that there's a decent amount of litter. And we recognize that given the fact that this is on school property, there might be restrictions around this, but if there was an opportunity to add maybe a trash bin on site to maybe prevent some of that litter from getting into resource areas, that would be great. And then if we could just get a little bit more information about the methods of tree protection, of tree protection, given the sort of small nature of the site, just to make sure that all of that is in place, that would be great. I'd love to hear a little bit more about it. I also listed those off very quickly, so I can go back through those one by one if that's helpful.
Yeah, no, thank you. So, definitely we will be going to, a lighter color for the surfacing, perhaps 2 colors, but they'll be lighter. And that can be put into the order conditions. The placement of a litter bin is something we'll need to coordinate with BPS, depending, if they want to, it's really their operations, whether if they put a bin there, whether it's an invitation for more litter or not. That's something we'll need to check back with the Boston Public Schools. As far as tree protection, our standard tree protection detail there, we're actually staying away from the trees with our proposed curbs, but we'll have a standard tree protection detail, which involves hardwood staking around the trees with a fence. And I don't know the best way to give you that, whether it's our standard detail to send that over to you so you can see what it is, or how we get this wrapped into the order conditions.
Great, yeah, I think that that sounds good. We can include that as a prior to construction condition, and then as far as the information on the bin, I don't that could just be something that we connect about offline. I know that might not be able to be built into the conditions right now, as you look into it and as the school looks into it.
Great, thank you.
Good. Is that it for you, Eleanor?
That is, thank you.
Okay, before I go to commissioners, I want to remind members of the public to provide public comment. Please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself. Send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov or via Twitter by tagging the Twitter handle @BostonEnviro and using the hashtag #ConcomHearing. Excuse me. Commissioner Sullivan.
Do you know if all of the site drains through private outfalls into the harbor, or does it come back up to the street? Municipal.
The current site drains out to the harbor. There's a catch basin that goes out to an outfall, and we're proposing the same runoff that would be going to that as existing as proposed.
All right, and none of your activities are going to block access to that catch basin so that it never gets cleaned, right? You'll still be able to clean it.
No, that will always be open. There will always be access. There's going to be inlet protection during
Right.
construction for erosion control.
And do you know what the snow removal practices are for that site?
We'd have to coordinate with BPS. I wouldn't know that answer.
All right.
I would like to note that there is a fence around the existing and proposed playground. And then there's 25-foot buffer to the edge of the seawall. So I don't know exactly what that means for snow removal, but it would be very difficult to dump the snow into the harbor.
I know, I'm only bringing those questions up because of past Conservation Commission agents used to ask those questions. Stephanie, just throwing that out there. So that's all I had.
Okay, so maybe as a solution here, when you connect with BPS, you can send along to Elena their snow removal procedures.
Yes, we'll ask BPS what they do
Okay.
out at that location.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Long,
Nothing for me. Thank you.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yeah, nothing here either. Thanks.
Commissioner Conan.
What time period is this site being prepared for?
The proposed timeline is they have a grant, some grant funding that needs, so the construction needs to be completed by I believe September 2024. So right now we will be putting the project out to bid in February, and they will be constructing it over the summer while school is out.
Yeah, I think I saw that in the NOI. Thank you.
Yep.
What I'm curious about is every opportunity to prepare for sea level rise is should be taken seriously, right? So what is it? Are we preparing for 2030, 2050, 2070? This is right next to the water. So that's
Yeah, the design life of this equipment is approximately 12 to 15 years. And then at that time, you know, probably it will need to be repaired or replaced.
12 to 15 years. So, okay, so maybe to 2040 or less.
Less than that, yeah.
2037.
There's not really an opportunity to do anything site-wide for protection. And again, this is a grant for specific playground equipment to be installed. So that's why we did not particularly do anything related to protection from additional flooding. It's already subject to flooding from the 1% annual chance flood. And it's, you know,
I've seen flooding there.
it can be, yeah, it would probably be similar in the next 12 years, maybe slightly larger depths.
Okay. But this is, I don't know if, I don't think there's anybody from BPS here, right? That's what I think you were saying earlier. I'm curious to know, you know, this kind of opportunity is also an opportunity to put some signage there about what it's being prepared for and what the sea level is going to be. So I'm curious about that, if signage could be included in this project, but that may be a question for BPS.
Yeah, I'll say, I mean, it's an interesting thought. I think that's, you know, is actually right on the harbor there. It could be an educational thing. Again, they're limited by a public grant. They don't have other funding to provide the adaptive and sensory equipment for the children that need. So their priority, of course, to spend their grant money has to be on the equipment. But, you know, we have add alternatives that are depending on how the bids come in. But that could be definitely an option. I think it's very interesting thought because we have some panels where the kids can interact and but again, we're talking about elementary kids who may have trouble reading to begin with, but it's, you know, maybe graphically there's a way to convey that thought.
Yeah, that would be good. Thank you. That's all, Chair Parker.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Richmond.
I don't have any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Herbst.
No questions, but I just am noting in the comment that somebody from BPS may be able to participate from the phone.
Okay. Yes, so that's our client from Michelle there, who just popped up in the chat. Thank you for noticing her.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you,
Yeah.
Michelle.
Okay, hi, I'm sorry. I didn't know if you could hear me. I was having a little technical difficulties. So I can address some of the questions. I love the idea of having a garbage can out there. We would have to really check that with the school because our custodians empty all of our garbage cans, and they have contracts that specify very, how many garbage cans they will empty and the distance from the school and everything like that. So that's actually a union issue, unfortunately, even though it's a great idea. We'd have to kind of work that out with the school and with their custodian and see if that's an acceptable solution. I think, really thinking about the rise in the sea level and the implications on the property is really such a good point and something we do need to consider moving forward. This is already an existing playground, so what the school did was they wanted to meet they have some children that have some special needs, and their needs are not being met with the current playground equipment. So they're bringing this playground equipment in, but it's really in the existing play space. And the budget is very, very small. So they've already had to make a lot of difficult decisions about the play equipment just related to the size of the space that they're working with, the existing footprint plus the budget. So they just have very limited funding to actually do this work, and it's ESSER funding. So their deadline for getting that spent is August 31st. Were there other questions?
No, Michelle, I think everything else we're adding is a post-conduction, either pre or post-construction conditions into the order that we've covered regarding the O&M plan, the lighter color of the playground itself, tree protection, snow removal. I know you're gonna have to check with BPS on with maybe the specific school on that.
And a lot of and a lot of our schools do not do snow removal in the play areas. Again, we don't have staff to do snow removal in playgrounds, and some schools, parents will come and do the snow removal, but it's just a matter of them coming out with shovels or something like that. So we could check with the school and see if they do remove snow there in the winter.
Okay, great, thank you. Elena, anybody from the public raise their hand?
I'm not seeing any raised hands, and we also don't have anything in the inbox.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'd entertain a motion to close the hearing, issue the order of conditions with the addition of the following special conditions that the proponent will get back to staff regarding the TSS removal metric. An O&M plan will be provided. Lighter color will be used for the playground surface. You're going to send in something regarding your tree protection measures and checking with BPS on, or at least a specific school on their snow removal procedures.
So
Mr.
moved.
Chair, could I add something to that list?
Okay.
Can we put in the order of conditions the need to have a garbage pail?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Michelle said that there might be a problem with the addition of the trash can. Elena, in our standard conditions, don't we have something in there about litter control?
We do have some language about litter control, and then I think that we also have some language drafted that's specific to, I want to say, parks or potentially condos. But that's language that could also be modified, and I'm not sure if there's maybe a way to phrase a condition in a way where if it's possible to add a trash can after BPS has looked into it.
Yeah, I think that's right. If possible, add a
Yeah.
trash can. Yeah.
That sounds good.
Well, I will certainly accept that because it's better than nothing. But I just wonder whether or not if it were part of the order of conditions that there be one, that sort of ends the discussion, I would think, with the union.
Okay, Michelle, would that end the discussion with the union?
That I do not know. So that's something we can always explore.
They initiate a grievance with the union for sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I just know on other projects, we've really wanted to put more, because we do have a lot of litter in our schools. And, our schools are basically public parks after hours. But we have been unable to put more, garbage cans out in the landscape because of the union issue.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not the slightest bit opposed to unions, but it seems to me unreasonable to have that space and not have a garbage pail. So I'm just trying to figure out a way that goes around the issue, and the discussion about how many garbage pails there are could be limited to places other than public places where people are generating garbage.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and we could definitely investigate if having that type of clause in there would just take it off the table.
Okay, that would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a very local issue, besides just whether they have a contract for somebody to empty a garbage can, which they may not, which would be an issue if it overflowed. There are also issues of whether, because it's acts as a public park after hours, it's not monitored. Having a garbage can actually may invite uninvited traffic for people to drop needles and other things which are not wanted. So it's a very local sensitive issue that we really should have the school review. But I think it should go in the order as a recommendation, and if possible, I totally support it as well. It seems to make common sense, but it's very complex, actually.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think Michael brings up a really good point, and we could talk to the school and say, what do you think about us putting a garbage can out there? And they may just be totally fine with it and not have an issue.
Okay, so let's do that.
I just want to understand, if people have things like needles and stuff we don't want in the garbage pail, they're not going to just leave them there if they're there anyway. I mean, I think that finding reasons to not do it isn't as good a position as to try to find the reasons to do it. I'm done.
Okay. So the motion is out there with the addition of the exploration about trash can, if possible. Would someone like to make the motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Long?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Commissioner Conan?
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond?
Aye.
Commissioner Herbst?
Aye.
I vote aye, that carries 7-0. Okay, thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is notice of intent for Boston file number 2023-064 from Brennan Consulting on behalf of Boston Public Schools for the proposed construction of a new addition to the existing school, redevelopment of the existing play area, and new utilities and parking alterations located at 105 Cummings Highway in Roslindale. The resource area is 100-foot buffer to isolated vegetated wetlands. Who's here on behalf of the applicant?
Hi, this is Cam Gozine. I'm a project manager with Brennan Consulting, the site civil engineering firm. I'm also joined by David Turcotte with Mount Vernon Group. They're the and Michelle Crowley from Crowley Cottrell, the landscape architects on the project.
Great, thank you. Floor is all yours.
Okay, would you mind going to the first slide? So this is just an illustrative plan of showing what the site looks like today. The site's a 3.17 acre site. The Washington Irving Middle School takes up a majority of the middle of the site. With parking off Hawthorne Street, there's a turf play field, playground in the playground area, and then there's a bus loop off Cummins Highway. Go to the next slide, please. So this is just an illustrative plan showing the proposed conditions of the site, which includes reconstruction of the Hawthorne parking area, complete redevelopment of the play area with a smaller play field, but more playground area, and outdoor classroom area to the plant south, and a completely redeveloped entrance off Cummins Highway with a building addition. Next slide, please. So this is just showing the best management practices, essentially the drainage infrastructure on site, with existing highlighted in green and proposed highlighted in blue. The green infrastructure was constructed as part of the 2016 Green Infrastructure Plan, which included subsurface infiltration systems, one in the parking lot, one behind the school, a bioswale that would take a second half of the portion of that parking area, and then a bioretention basin. In addition to those measures, which will be maintained, we are proposing a new porous pavers and subsurface infiltration system at the new or at the redeveloped entrance off Cummins Highway, which will infiltrate the new building and all of the proposed work on the Cummins entrance. Next slide, please. So this is just showing the existing drainage conditions. I just wanted to illustrate that these are the different catchment areas showing where the water is currently going on site, how it's broken down. Most of the water under existing conditions goes to an existing combined sewer system that runs directly through underneath the school through the site, with a portion of the site going onto Sycamore Street, which is EX1, and then EX3, all the rainwater on that portion just sheets off site and goes directly onto the closed drainage system on Cummins Highway. Next slide, please. So this shows that the existing catchment areas are essentially maintained. The existing drainage infrastructure as part of the Green Infrastructure Plan is being maintained, but the Cummins entrance, rainwater is now being treated rather than allowing it to just sheet directly off site. It's either being treated through the porous pavers or the proposed subsurface infiltration system. And before the rainwater gets the subsurface infiltration system, there are also contact water quality units for TSS removal. Next slide, please. So this is just showing the actual isolated vegetative wetland impacts. There are no impacts to the isolated vegetative wetland itself, but there is 6,200 square feet of impact to the buffer area. This includes the removal of one 12-inch caliper tree, but we are proposing planting, I believe, 45 additional trees on site, which of 3.5 to 6-inch caliper, which will offset more than offset the loss of that 12-inch caliper tree. In addition to that, the area within the buffer zone is actually, there will be a reduction in impervious area as well. And this illustration also shows a portion of the mitigation measures during construction. We'll be using straw wattles and silt fences to stop any silt from leaving the site and discharge into that isolated vegetated wetland. There will be temporary construction entrances to prevent construction vehicles from treading silt and dirt off the site. There will be silt sacks placed in every existing and proposed catch basin on site, as well as catch basins surrounding the site to prevent sediment from discharging into the closed drainage systems. And I don't show it on this plan, but we will also be, there will be sequencing, proper, dust control, and we will be following all the measures outlined in the draft order of conditions that was sent to us during construction and post-construction as well. So that was really, that was my presentation. If you have any questions.
Sure. Great. Thank you. Okay. Let's start off with the trees. One is coming down in the buffer area, but I think an additional 26 others are being removed from the project in total. And you're going to be planting, at the end, you get a net of 25 more than what are there now. Do you know what the caliper replacement is here?
Total caliper replacement?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Michelle, are
you have a plan
available?
somewhere besides what you have in the NOI, the narrative? It's a long NOI, 530 pages, so I might have missed it.
I don't believe that I have a total caliper existing and proposed in the NOI.
Yeah, this is Michelle Crowley. We don't have that calculation right now, but we can easily get that to you.
Okay, Michelle, do you have a some sort of tree inventory plan in here?
There should be. I'm not sure if it's in the NOI, but we can add that. We have the existing conditions plan, as well as then the proposed plan that shows all of the trees and their calipers that are being replaced. But I don't think we don't have the existing conditions plan does show the caliper, but we don't have it written as a part. So we can do that.
Oh, you know what? Actually, I think I might have found it.
Yes, the
somewhere around
plans are included.
Yeah, there we go. I see it. It's somewhere around page 170 to 180. At least there's some information in here. Okay. Okay. We might need something more robust. I'll let Commissioners Long or Wilson figure that out with you. Are you going to be getting a NIPD's stormwater permit for this project, Cam?
Yes.
Good. Okay. As far as stockpiling of soils, are these MCP soils or just garden variety urban fill?
I believe it's garden variety urban fill, but I would have to talk to my geotech about that.
Okay, so we'll want to make sure that those are secured with erosion controls surrounding them and probably at least 50 feet away from the buffer zone. I noticed that you have a O&M plan from 2018. I believe that's the
yes. We have a note that was included as part of the as an attachment in the green infrastructure plan from 2016, I believe. But we have our own separate operation and maintenance plan.
Yep, I just found that as well. Okay, good, good. And then Commissioner Herbst may weigh in on this. The delineation of the IVW was performed 18 months ago. I looked around, I couldn't find any guidance on what is considered stale when presented to the Conservation Commission, though delineations are good for 3 years. So using 3 years as the default provision here, when are you going to begin construction? When will you be done?
David, are you on the call? I think that you would have a
yes.
better
Yes, hi. This is David Turcott with Mount Vernon Group Architects, project manager. Construction is expected to start in May of 24, May or June of 24.
Great.
And completion is September of 2025.
Okay, so you'd have the work done theoretically within the 3-year window of this delineation. Okay. I think that's it for me. Commissioner Connor will bring this up, but this did occur to me that with all you're doing here, there is an opportunity for signage regarding the infiltration systems and everything else in the IVW itself. Elena, do you have anything on this?
I didn't have any notes for the commission. I had a quick question for the team. I had sent over, I believe it was yesterday, a revised version of the draft conditions because we hadn't included the standard set of conditions that are usually applied to a project that doesn't go for a DEP filing as well. And so I just wanted to make sure that that first section of the draft conditions looked okay to them as well, because that had been updated.
Yes, it did look okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great. Okay, good. Okay, Commissioner Sullivan. Oh, and before we do that, let me just remind members of the public that if you want to provide public comment, please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself. Send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov or via Twitter by tagging the Twitter handle @BostonEnviro and using the hashtag #ConComHearing. Okay, Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, I thought I heard you say you were removing one 12-inch caliber tree and putting in 26 3 to 6 inch caliber trees. Is that what you said?
I believe that number might not be. I believe that was the number. Let me check though.
You weren't removing 26 trees. You were taking out one and putting a whole bunch of new ones in. Or what?
There will be more trees removed on site, but that was just the one tree that is above 12 inches in caliper within the buffer area as part of the IVW Boston Con requirements.
Right. All right.
But there will be more trees removed on site, yes.
Yeah. And the large green courtyard area, I believe, is also an infiltration function. It's a green infrastructure function when it was constructed in 2016. You showed the other areas that have the, biofiltration, et cetera, but I believe that big green area is also part of it.
Well, that was, I believe that's more of just a filtration system.
Yeah, it allows the water.
I should have included that, yes.
Yeah, no, just that gives you extra credit. We're always trying to give you guys extra credit.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Struggle as we might. That's all I had for comments.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Long.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So appreciate some of the information on the tree removals and the detail on the landscape plan, but I think I might like to see some more of those calculations on the total caliper added, but maybe Commissioner Wilson has something to add there as well. But that's really all I had to say on that. Other than I think I saw some comments in the chat asking about the ownership of the wooded area to the south or southeast. It looks like some of those parcels are owned by the city, some are private, owned by the church, a church of some sort, and other private landowners. So I wanted to include that information for you all. But that's it.
Great. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Wilson.
Yeah, I'd agree with Commissioner Long. Just having a bit more, I mean, I guess maybe basically a table or something like that, that's sort of, we've gotten from other folks that just lay it out perfectly clear for both us and the public, like, total number of trees on site, total number that are being removed versus existing, ones that are jurisdictional, and then both like what their total caliper inches are. Because I think that's part of it, is that the very little of it is within our jurisdictional area, but it's important to also get, the big picture as well for understanding the project. And I mean, beyond that, like, the proposed trees that are listed here look great, sort of things that would thrive on the site, native plantings. So thanks for providing that.
Commissioner Wilson, were you able to see what they provided for information on the trees in the NOI? I looked at it quickly here. I think we need more based on what you just said.
Yeah.
Yep, okay, good.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, Commissioner Conan?
Thank you, Chair Parker. Yeah, I was also wondering, how many trees are being removed. It's really great that a lot of trees are being planted. It's important to just remind ourselves every now and then that as we are in the unfolding climate change and climate crisis world, mature trees are very, very valuable because of their mitigation, adaptation, and carbon sequestration benefits. When you take down a mature tree and replace it with a sapling, it's going to take a decade or two or longer to be able to provide similar kind of benefits. So it's good that many other trees are being planted here, but the trees that are being cut are always a concern. So it'd be good to see what is being done here. Anytime a tree can be saved, that is a good thing. As for the signage, thank you, Chair Parker, for bringing that up. This is a school, so it provides automatically an opportunity. This is an educational space for the kids as they wander, as they play, to look and see what's going on, whether it's green infrastructure, blue-green infrastructure, mitigation measures, adaptation measures, whatever they are. The signage there that can be there as part of this project is a great opportunity, a learning opportunity for children. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Richmond?
Yeah, I just want to pile on one subject, and that's the one about taking out mature trees. Recently, well, not so recently, I was involved in a project that was done by a Nobel scientist. And what they found was that they used to take older trees out as a management of the forest, and they decided that that really wasn't the best theory of protection. And so I second what the commissioner has just said about how it makes a difference whether you're taking out mature trees and putting in saplings. So I would also go along with Commissioner Wilson's, and I take it Commissioner Long's request that we get a better understanding of how many trees are there, how many are coming out, and what the sizes are of the ones coming out and going in. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Herbst?
Yeah, I have a question about drainage to the isolated vegetated wetland, and trying to understand whether there's any change at all, whether because of changes in surfaces or trees coming or going in what will drain to that isolated vegetated wetland.
There was not expected to be any change to the drainage going to that isolated vegetative wetland. In fact, the entire side of the site along opposite of the vegetated wetland is curbed and drains towards the site. So there is no plan for water to sheet off site towards the isolated vegetative wetland.
Okay, I did see that. I just want to note, and maybe this is more for the future if we ever had filings in this area, but the wetlands consulting report from 22 noted that that land may also be isolated land subject to flooding. So I was both concerned whether there would be less or more drainage there, because that may be a concern. And I also just wanted to note for folks who haven't seen the site, I think education on the isolated wetlands would be great. It's actually a little, I think, hard to see, but I mean, there could be signage maybe along the fence. It's outside of the school property. So I think that's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I noticed we have many comments in the chat. A lot of them are about the trees. As we said, we're going to be getting more information on the trees from their proponent. Elena, does anybody have their hand raised who'd like to speak?
I'm not seeing any hands raised at the moment.
Okay.
Oh,
Let's-
now, yes, we have one, Nia Lewis.
Okay, floor is yours. Who is it again? Nia Lewis?
Yes.
Okay. Just asked her to unmute. Okay, looks like you're unmuted. Okay, must be having technical difficulties. Okay, so as I said, we're going to be getting more information on the trees. There are questions in there about protections to street drainage that happens currently on Hawthorne Street. Cam, do you want to talk about drainage issues? It seems like if anything, these measures will improve drainage in the area.
Drainage on Hawthorne Street
Yeah,
or just the surrounding area itself in general?
I guess the surrounding area. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with the geography, so it does say Hawthorne. But anyways, why don't you
Okay.
talk about the drainage?
Sure. Well, on Hawthorne Street, we aren't planning on changing any drainage patterns on site. The way the site drains in the parking lot next to Hawthorne Street, water should be sheeting onto site, towards the site, not off site onto Hawthorne. So there shouldn't be any changes, or there shouldn't be any additional water going towards the closed drainage system on Hawthorne Street. And during construction, we'll be placing those catch basin silt sacks in the catch basins along Hawthorne Street, and we will be placing the silt sock along that side of the property line as an additional measure.
Okay, thank you. Someone else asked about parking spaces, staff. I don't know, staff parking spaces. That's not within our jurisdiction, but if you have a question about that, I would call your local mayor's liaison or ISD. We don't know anything about that. Okay, so with that, I think we would like to see the updated tree inventory, some more detail on the trees. You've said that you're good with the order of conditions, so it sounds like your homework for next time is to submit that tree inventory plan. And yeah, I think that's about it for now. So with that, I would entertain a motion to continue the hearing.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Sorry. Aye.
Commissioner Conan,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
Aye.
Commissioner Herbst,
Aye.
and I vote aye. That carries 7-0. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There have been a number of continuances continued. Our notice of intent for DEP file number 0061704 in Boston file number 2020-007. DEP notice, DEP file number 0061772 in Boston file number 2021-010. DEP file number 0061961 in Boston file number 2023-051. And DEP file number 0061957 in Boston file number 2023-047. We will now begin our regular meeting. First item on the agenda is a request for a certificate of compliance for DEP file number 0061670 for the construction of a 10-foot wide multimodal green link path located at the end of Arboretum Road in Rosendale. Resource areas a riverfront 100-foot buffered inland bank. Eleanor, what do you have on this?
So the team had reached out to us and requested a continuance. They'll be letting us know once they've wrapped up the work on site, and we'll conduct another site visit to confirm that everything is done.
Okay, I don't believe we need to take a vote on that, so we'll look forward to the report next time. Okay, next item is administrative updates. And looks like we have a presentation by VHB on the Wharf District Council's Conceptual District Protection and Resiliency Plan. And there it is.
Great.
Eleanor, who's presenting? Okay. Go ahead.
Stephanie,
So,
can I start?
sure. Well, I'll just introduce the team. Stephanie Krull, VHB. We also have Derek Anderson from AREP and Mark Margulies from the Wharf District Council. And Mark, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. I'll just say briefly, and for those who are not familiar, the Wharf District Council is a group of residents, businesses, institutions, and other stakeholders who are interested in the part of Boston that, frankly, is more exposed to sea level rise than many of the areas, and it certainly is one of great concern. It also happens to be the area that has the most public infrastructure inland, and we decided as a group in about 3 years ago that we needed to come up with some sort of plan to get the ball rolling on what needed to be done to protect the entire district. The city is working on a number of parts of the city that need to be protected as well, but ours was lower on the list. And so what we have done is to hire AREP and gather NVHB and a number of other consultants and gather a large group of stakeholders together. I think we represent 50 or 60 different entities, property owners, businesses, and so forth, to put together a plan for the long-term protection of this part of Boston. I would just like to say before I turn it over, none of us want to do this. This is not a project that anyone thinks is something that we would love to be able to take on. We are doing this because we do not feel that that the planet is going to give us the option of not addressing it without enormous cost to the future of Boston. So with that, I'll turn it over to whoever's taking it next.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Mark. I know you've all been at this for quite a while, so very excited to see the results. Derek, I guess it's up to you now.
Yeah, sure. To be respectful of the commission's time, we have prepared to do this in about 10 minutes. If you're interested, it's, I think, a little more effective if we can spend 15 or 20, but unless I hear anything from you all, I'm going to run through it quickly in 10 and certainly be available for questions. Next slide. You can skip ahead again. So this is what the district's up against, as everybody I'm sure is aware, but this is, you can see here extensive flooding in the Wharf District and downtown Boston area. This is just the 2030 1% or 100-year storm surge as projected by the Massachusetts Coast Flood Risk Model. So extensive flooding there. In addition, the table on the right shows we're looking at significant increase in the number of sunny day tidal floods that'll be affecting the city, up from 7 in 2021 to a projected 50 to 70 days of sunny day flooding in the district by 2050. Next slide. To give a sense of the existing shoreline conditions, we've got a few snapshots of the area. Just generally, most of the coastal structures here are vertical seawalls throughout the entire project area, with a few exceptions. The image at the top right is Christopher Columbus Park, where you can see a little bit of the toe of the wall exposed at low tide, which isn't typical of the rest of the area. At the bottom left is a shot of Harbor Towers, where you can see some revetments, or crushed stone really, dumped at the toe of the seawalls there, exposed also at low tide. And then the three images on the bottom right of the slide show some other conditions at Central and Long Wharfs, where there are a lot of older seawalls that are now in disrepair and have been augmented with new seawalls and decking systems behind or above them. So just to give a flavor of what the coastal conditions are here. Next slide. Right, so this is the existing district from Four Point Channel at the left over to Christopher Columbus at the right and back to Congress Street at the inland side. It includes 16 public and private properties along the waterfront. Our plan, the Wharf District plan, really groups these properties into 6 projects, what we're calling sub-district projects. You can see them listed there. Fort Point Channel at the left, the Northern Ave project in there around the bridge, Rose Wharf, Harbor Towers, Central Wharf, and Long Wharf. So 6 projects there, really so that we can phase this work over time, given that it is a very large project. It would be a bit nuts to try to do everything all at once. Additionally, I note the 3 sub-district projects at the right of the screen, the northern area. We're calling this our North Resilience Zone. Those are the properties we're talking Harbor Towers, Central Wharf, and Long Wharf. Those are the properties that are flooding today and really need action immediately. So most of our presentation is really focused on those 3 areas, as that's the area that we really need to be progressing pretty quickly, where the rest of the district, we're looking at, we're going to need interventions by 2050 or so. Next slide. This is the outcome we're looking to prevent. And then next slide. Obviously understand some of the critical infrastructure at risk there in addition to properties. This is what we're proposing to do to prevent that outcome. So I'll walk through this a little bit. Generally from left to right, you can see in kind of brighter orange there, we are proposing to raise the harbor walk everywhere we're showing brighter orange. So from the Fort Point Channel all the way to about midpoint of Rose Wharf, taking the existing harbor walk, raising that up to the elevation we need to protect the community from flooding. Then from the center point or so of Rose Wharf over to Harbor Towers in brighter green, we are proposing to push the existing seawall out, so put a new seawall outboard of the existing seawall in that area to create new publicly accessible open space, which provides a very necessary bit of area for flood storage for rainfall that might fall on the dry side of the system. So this whole area all drains today from from Beacon Hill down to the harbor, and we really need to make sure that rainfall is captured and stored on the dry side of this, especially as the city's outfalls will become submerged with storm surges in the future. So we're making sure to provide a lot of storage for that. That open space between Rose Wharf and Harbor Towers is really critical to providing the storage needed for that area, as well as creating a very inclusive and welcoming waterfront where it's quite private feeling today. Then as we continue along, Harbor Garage, just to the right of Harbor Towers there, our new living shoreline steps down to the waterfront. Then Central Wharf at the aquarium, again, all the way over to Long Wharf. Again, we're back into that orange harbor walk. So again, elevating the harbor walk through those areas. And then a living shoreline in front of Christopher Columbus Park. In dark gray throughout, we've got floating breakwaters. These are designed to reduce the wave height, so we don't have to go as high on the inland areas. And then notably in front of Central Wharf, again, the aquarium, you'll see in that darker green, a new flood protection island and floating wetlands, again, to knock those waves down so we don't have to go as high inland and create ecological opportunities there. Next slide. I'll also note as we're flipping over here, that this plan has unanimous consensus among all 16 public and private property owners. And it's really what the community has expressed as being their preferred option for a district-wide flood protection system for the district, and really being necessary to make sure that we continue to thrive in the future. Some of the opportunities that this would provide beyond just flood protection are shown on this slide. So just quickly here, some of the opportunities we're pushing that, here at Harbor Towers, creating that new publicly accessible open space. This is really designed to create a great inclusive space. Instead of just having a vertical seawall that cuts off views and access, we're gently sloping from the existing ground up to these higher elevations, creating accessible harbor walks, open public space, places that people feel welcome and like they should belong here. Opportunities for water recreation and transportation, ecological opportunities in the form of living shorelines, or in this case, places for filter feeders, under and around the harbor walk areas. Opportunities for new vegetation and shade structures to deal with extreme heat, and then underground here, flood storage tanks and pump systems to deal with the rainfall on the dry side of this. Next slide.
Derek, if I could just add one thing, I just want to remind everybody that who is not familiar with this already, that this is not for protection of the existing buildings. Every one of the existing buildings has its own plan for dealing with rising sea levels. This is for protection, to have a continuous barrier to protect the properties and the infrastructure inboard of the waterfront properties. So none of this flood storage is for the properties that it's on. It is, as Derek said, for all the water that is flowing down from above.
That's right. Yeah, and so these flood storage tanks are not private. They're not, this one, for example, does nothing for Harbor Towers for their property. It is designed to keep the entire district, the Central Artery Tunnel, the MBTA's tunnels, and so on from flooding out by providing storage here on private property for public benefit. And this is something that Harbor Towers and the other property owners have all agreed to host on their property for that public good. Next slide. And I think we're actually going to skip a couple slides here in the interest of time. So we'll skip to the next slide. And next. And one more. We can come back to these if folks have questions. Just yeah. So on these next slides, just a couple images to give a bit more flavor of what this plan is. So at just working from in the northern resilience zone here. So basically the North 3 projects, sub-district projects. We've got here Long Wharf again. In orange, just raising that harbor walk up around Long Wharf, and then a living shoreline, Christopher Columbus Park, and then floating breakwaters in the water. Next slide of an existing conditions section here. You can see the harbor walk down low around Long Wharf here. So this is what it looks like today. And then next slide shows what's proposed. So you can see this generally shows what we're doing in many places. We are raising the harbor walk up, but not providing a stark vertical wall that cuts off views, cuts off access. It's a gently sloping elevation from the lower existing elevations to the higher elevation of the new harbor walk that we need to protect the district, providing views and accessible walkways for people to continue to access and get to the water and experience the water here in the harbor. Next slide. At Central Wharf at the aquarium, again, raising that harbor walk around the wharf and flood protection islands and floating wetlands just outboard of the wharf. Next slide. Gives a couple of sections again. So this is existing conditions in front of 255 State Street. You can see relatively low-lying harbor walk here. Next slide. Shows what's proposed. So again, gently sloping from existing grounds up to the elevated harbor walk. Plenty of accessible walkways. These are all under 5%, so people still of all abilities are able to access and enjoy our waterfront and not be cut off from it in the way a vertical seawall might do, while opportunities for new vegetation and shading. Next slide. Central Wharf, the aquarium, you can see there on the left today, and the next slide shows what's proposed. So you can see the flood protection island there, again designed to knock down wave heights so we don't have to go as high inland while providing ecological opportunities alongside the floating wetlands just outboard there. So lots of marine ecology improvement opportunities here, as well as educational opportunities for the aquarium to bring people out and really get to know and understand the marine ecology much more intimately than we can do today. Again, raising the harbor walk up around the wharf itself. Next slide. And at Harbor Towers, again, raising the harbor walk up a bit, but also bumping out the seawall and providing floating breakwaters. So next slide, it will again just go through a couple sections here, and then I'll hand over to Stephanie for the last couple of slides. But you can see in front of the harbor garage building, stepping down to the water today. And the next slide shows what we're proposing, which is we'll be stepping up to the harbor in the future. But again, gently sloping, similar architectural language as we've seen elsewhere, living shorelines, new living shorelines installed, and steps down to the waterfront in the background there over by the Simmons Theater. Next slide. At Harbor Towers, you can see the existing harbor walk low-lying today, hugging tight to the building, feeling very private and unwelcoming, in my opinion, today. And what we're proposing on the next slide is to raise that up gently and push that seawall out again so we can provide the space that we really need for that stormwater storage tank and the pumps, while also creating a much more welcoming and inviting waterfront that will be accessible to the public, and all the many other opportunities that this kind of infrastructure can provide. Next slide, I'll hand it back over to Stephanie to touch on some of the regulatory issues.
Sure, thanks, Derek. So the way we structured this process was prior to beginning the whole alternatives development, we looked at all of these regulations and all of these plans and policies and guidelines and identified what the constraints all were. And then we did it a second time after the alternatives were designed so that they could comply with as much as possible of all of these, just to back check it again to make sure that they do in fact comply. Next slide, please. And what we found was that none of these regulations, policies, plans, or guidelines prohibit alterations to the shoreline for the purpose of increasing resilience to flooding. So there are no regulatory red flags here. There's certainly regulatory processes and, pluses and minuses to different types of solutions, but none of what is proposed is, unimplementable from a regulatory perspective. We did want to note the presence here of the magenta zone, which is the magenta striped area. It was designated in 1968 by Congress to be not a navigable water of the U.S. So because of that, it is not subject to Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act. Next slide, please.
What does that mean?
So this is just a table from the report that shows a couple of different permitting and review processes. So we did note where a notice of intent would be required, where Chapter 91 would be required, where MEPA review would be required. And as it relates to wetlands, all of the alternatives would require a notice of intent because they all impact land under ocean, coastal bank, and land subject to coastal storm flowage. So individually and collectively, they all are in your jurisdiction. Next slide, please. This table just indicates how they all comply with the performance standards under the Wetlands Protection Act. So we looked at the different standards for land under ocean and for coastal bank here, and we note that everything will be designed to avoid the adverse effects that it's required to avoid, that the pile supported structures and the fill, will also avoid those impacts. And there will likely be time of year restrictions from DMF because of the essential fish habitat and the anadromous fish runs in this location. We're also noting that there'd be no adverse effect on bank stability. And in fact, one of the desired outcomes is to improve bank stability. Next slide, please. So this is the trickiest part, and I think the most important part, and it's the wetlands ordinances, regulations related to land subject to coastal storm flowage. I do want to emphasize that as a result of this project, there will be less land subject to coastal storm flowage. So it would eliminate the resource area, as all of these district scale shoreline protection measures would do. That is actually their purpose. But nevertheless, it will still protect the resource area values of that resource area, including storm damage prevention, flood control, prevention of pollution, and mitigating the impacts of climate change. So I do want to be clear that that's what will happen all over Boston as these things are implemented. And this, is kind of a little detailed for this conversation, but we are able to demonstrate that each of these individual projects will be able to comply with the wetlands ordinance. And then there's just one last slide that shows some of the next steps, and I'll just let Derek describe that for you.
Yeah, it's just very quick. We're currently wrapping up an inventory of water transportation infrastructure and soliciting feedback from folks like you and other regulatory agencies so that we can refine our permitting approach and try to get input and help us identify how we get this important project done so that we can protect the district and continue to thrive. Additionally, into the next year, we're looking at developing a funding and financing strategy and an operating model to really bring this together, get the right partners in place so that there are people and agencies identified with responsibilities for funding this, for delivering the final designs, and for the long-term operations and maintenance that will be so important for making sure that this works well into the future. And then we're looking to dig a little bit more into some of the engineering analyses where the plan to date is a conceptual level plan. And then just continue to coordinate with our abutting neighbors to share some of the lessons learned and processes of this process, and continue to coordinate with funding and implementation agencies into the coming year. I think that is it for us. We're very interested in any comments or thoughts or suggestions that you all may have, and happy to dig in further detail on anything if you're interested.
Derek, let me just add, if I may, one second. Derek went very quickly, and I think that he did an excellent job, as he always does. If you're interested in the full report or more information, our website is wharfdistrictcouncil.org, and there's a huge report with a ton of information and background from both Stephanie and Derek's firm, excuse me. I encourage you to go there. We are, and this surprises me enormously, but we have been told that this is the first public-private partnership effort of this kind in the country. If there are others, I'd like to know about them so that we can follow their path. But we're trying to do something apparently that's on the cutting edge of what every city in the country is going to have to do, as we all know. So we look forward to working with you on figuring out how we can protect our city.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Okay, a couple things. First of all, as someone who takes the water ferry back and forth to work every day and hoping to catch the 8 o'clock ferry this evening, last one home. Can't thank you enough for all the work that you're doing in that area. As far as a public-private partnership operating model, I don't know how far along they are, but I know down in New York City, I've read about, I don't think it's as advanced as this plan is, but the thought that they would have to do a P3 solution to what they're going through. And I think it might revolve around the seawall, the Manhattan seawall. But anyways, that might be something to look. I know a place to look. I know that Derek, I think that you've provided us with your report to Elena the last time you were before us. So I think we do have it in our files. Staff has access to it, and the website is a great resource. Quick question on as far as getting feedback, you're going to publish the report. You've thrown a lot at us tonight. I'm sure you'll get some initial feedback this evening from other commissioners, but if anybody wanted to provide additional comment after sitting with the report and sitting with this presentation for a little while, how much time do we have?
Oh, this is going to
forever.
Years and years and years and years. It's very difficult. Michael, it's a good question. It is difficult for us to know how to move from where we are to actual implementation, because certainly the Wharf District Council is not going to build this. So we are working with the Army Corps. We are working through the permitting process, but it's going to be a long haul.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, with that, do you have any estimate on the cost? Probably too early, but.
No, that's published in the report. It's broken down by timeline. So in the immediate timeline, where I think we're looking for a $250 million. But in the longer term, to do everything that we need through 2070, we're closer to $900 billion construction costs. We're looking at $1.2 billion-ish if you include 50 years of O&M.
Okay, and have you considered, or are you thinking about? It wouldn't be an improvement district assessment. Will landowners be and other stakeholders within the area, will they be contributing? Will there be some sort of an assessment for them?
So exploring opportunities for funding is very much one of our next steps for 2024. That's immediately something that we're looking to answer. There are lots of ways that can be done, lots of potential folks to fund things. In a lot of cases, I'm sure our initial pass it will be we won't have enough money. So we'll be looking at different creative ways to gain funds, whether it's through grants, private investments and entrepreneurship, or many other potential. So we'll be looking at everything is on the table, and we don't have answers for what that is just yet, but we will certainly look at getting there in the next steps over the coming year.
Only the right question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of like, it wouldn't be a business improvement district, but it might be a resiliency district. And you would need funds for maintenance further on down the road as well. So
it's going to be have that and all the other things. The feds have got to kick in, the state, and it's huge. It's a huge. It's a lot of money.
Yeah, understandably. Okay, Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, have you been working with the BPDA with their Long Wharf RFP? And does it fall in general with your concept?
Mark, you want me to take that one or?
Yeah.
Yes, so we've worked closely with Rich McGinnis and the other folks at BPDA throughout this process to align with their goals. They've been extremely helpful and supportive along the way. Obviously, we've been coordinating with them a bit. We do understand that their Long Wharf project is really looking at near-term flooding. So the flooding that happens now, addressing our immediate needs, more so than looking at, say, 2050 or 2070. We are hoping to continue to work with them to ensure that the BPDA's plans don't preclude what we see as being necessary in this, longer term vision here, and can be the first step in building towards this plan.
Yeah, because that my fear is that they won't build the foundations needed for future expansion or vertical expansion of the Harbor Walk. In other words, they'll take care of today's problem, and we'll have to dig it all up again. The other question I had is, you mentioned the Army Corps of Engineers, who were real active and then have disappeared into the wilds as they study all this stuff. Have you heard any more from them about what you're proposing and how it might fit in with a bunch of other people's plans?
So we attended some of the Army Corps meetings that they were holding publicly a few months back to make sure that we're on their radar, and have talked, extensively with the Environment Department, Allison Brizius, and as well as BPDA with Rich McGinnis to try to keep on the radar there as they work with the Army Corps. Our understanding is Army Corps is going to really be engaging a public process after the summer of 2024. So I would anticipate that they will be more public and having meetings, summer and fall of 2024. And we're really hoping to make sure that we're meeting up with them and on their radar. I think it's our intent and hope that the Wharf District Council plan becomes the locally preferred option in their study for this area, and that they be considerate of it in that regards, which would allow them to look at it as one option that may receive some funding from the Army Corps through their process. But it's been quiet from them over the last few months since they had their first kind of kickoff meetings publicly. We do understand that they're looking to make a recommendation to Congress, I think in 2026. So we got a couple, 2 or 3 years here.
And we've also met separately with the Army Corps, just related specifically to this project, as far as permittability and, some tips and best practices for how to set up applications and designs that could actually get the required permits.
Yeah, because to me, all of this stuff, we built a big dig, we get by it. But now when you're starting to encroach on the waterfront, I just see a more difficult permitting task, not an impossible one, but a more difficult one.
And they did say that they did not see any red flags with this whole thing as far as permittability from the federal perspective, which was great.
Well, we got to keep them from retiring then until we get that back.
It was a younger woman, so.
Oh, so this hope.
Christine Jasek. So.
The Christopher Columbus Park, I heard rumblings that the Parks Department might be poking around there for some kind of future design. Have you heard that?
The Parks and Rec Department put out 2 years ago an intent to redevelop Christopher Columbus Park. And again, last year we were hearing that that was going to come out. I understand, and they have limitations on their staff. And I'm sure there are other things behind the scenes. You know, there's a lot of abutters and stakeholders that I'm sure that they are being mindful to include in the process. I haven't heard anything in the last 6 months or so, but the folks at the BPDA did mention about 6 months ago that Parks and Rec was still planning to redevelop Christopher Columbus Park and that it would include flood protection. That's about what I know over there.
Yeah, I only asked that because of the scope of the water and sewer thing. There was a gigantic tank under the
Right.
Park.
Right.
And you guys got some tanks over by Harvard Towers, which would eventually have to be under some public agency. However, we floated at some point in time. Not just the cost of it, but someone's going to run these things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and John, we thank you for your input on that, and we understand it's a system, not tanks and pumps. So
That's exactly right. It's all going to be coordinated all together all at once. No, I think it's a very good plan. I'm glad somebody's been out there doing it. I find it funny that you got the wall of Congress Street. You know, this is us, that's them. I don't know how you demarcate areas, who your friends are, who they're not. Not suggesting that's how you did it, but it just looks strange. But all in all, I think it's a very good idea, and I like seeing groups like yours pushing it forward because somebody's got to answer this question before we all drown. That's all I had.
There you go. Commissioner Sullivan, on what you said, do you see any opportunity to bond any of this work if a public entity gets involved?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, nobody can afford any of this stuff without long-term bonds, even 40 or 50-year bonds. You know, we're always hung up on 30-year bonds. That's not going to work for the billions of dollars we're going to need. And the state's got to realize they have transportation systems, major highways, the entire transit system that brings people into the city, that makes all the money so we can pay state taxes and keep them going. So they have a huge stake in this. And I think that the governor has appointed several people in the climate end of business that seriously need to look at what the work that's been done so far here. So, you know, I'm just saying it's very good that you're this far advanced, not just thought processes, but you've got pictures people can look at.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Long?
Thank you. Thanks for the details presentation. Definitely lots of exciting ideas. I'm glad Commissioner Sullivan brought up Christopher Columbus Park. Not that I don't know anything about the Parks Department plans, but I know that when you talk to the Parks Commission, as you kind of outlined as one of the entities you need to talk to, they'll certainly know more than I do. I really kind of honed in on those natural elements, the living shorelines and the floating wetlands. I know that you have your team of researchers looking at things, but just a couple of maybe examples to look at that are maybe far along. There's the National Aquarium in Baltimore that has a pretty well developed floating wetland island prototype that they're, I think, building out more and more of. That looked pretty similar to what you had in your mock-up, although their tidal range is more like 3 feet in the harbor versus the 8 to 10 feet or whatever it is where we're looking here. So maybe a little bit different there. You also mentioned, you know, the importance of like an O&M plan. So I'd be really curious to see how an O&M plan fits for like those kind of living or natural elements as far as like vegetation maintenance. I'm sure you've thought about this. I wonder about the possibility of building in upland migration potential for things like living shorelines as they get the coastal squeeze effect from sea level rise and whatnot. I don't know how you would do that, but if this is a long-term solution, that would seem to make sense if it's feasible. So those are a couple of my rapid fire kind of comments. I don't really have any questions for you, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah, thank you. Those are great comments. Certainly stuff we're looking at, so appreciate that very much.
Of course.
Commissioner Wilson.
Yeah, no, fantastic to see this work and sort of loosely been tracking it along the way. I guess just in terms of rolling up our comments, do you want those to come from us as like concerned members of the public, or rolled up as and processed by the Conservation Commission as we sort of review the docs, or as we, engage with this, as you guys continue to develop the plans?
Guess I would turn that back to the chair and ask what works best for you, because
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. I guess I would turn it back to you as you're going out and you're looking for funding and you're looking for partners. It seems to me that a letter from the commission is something better for you to have, so you can show
great.
support, sort of an impetus to fund or whatever, if that makes sense to you.
I think that's a wonderful idea, because everyone we talk to says, oh, this is a great idea, but someone else is going to think it's a bad idea. And we hear that from everybody, right? So it would be great if we could start to accumulate some positive things that we could say to people that their concerns aren't necessarily fully well-founded.
Yeah. Or at the very least, something that says that projects of this nature are allowable under the Wetlands Protection Act and the Boston Wetlands Ordinance. Even just going that far and not even going into detail would be super helpful.
Yep. That actually is a great idea.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
One of the things that we've discovered is that each of the permitting agencies has a particular thing, of course, that they're charged with trying to manage and regulate. But they don't necessarily take into account what the other people are also trying to, like Chapter 91 has all sorts of, really important things, but it doesn't really focus necessarily on protection of the natural marine habitat as much as it does some other things. So what and then there's the whole inclusivity side, which doesn't come into the, some people's charge in trying to protect stormwater management. So we're trying to get everybody on the same page. And the more we can get everybody to realize that it has to be a complete solution for everyone, the better off we'll be.
Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think
the
letters of support, the letters of support, you can't get started on them too early, because then they get more powerful as they're actually buying into the plan. The only other thing I was going to say is that I've seen a couple places where conservancies get started like this, basically, and then you sort of build momentum, and then the tools of government, like you were mentioning, Chair Parker, like a TIF or setting up a district and everything like that, then but I mean, incredible legwork in terms of trying to get that P3 off the ground. And this is what it looks like. So thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wilson. Go ahead.
Just on that point, in terms of feedback, I will note that one of the things we're collecting right now from information from you all and the other regulatory authorities is, if there are suggestions for how to move this through the regulatory processes, we are all ears. If there are other suggestions that you may have in terms of comments, if you wanted to pass things along, on any of the topics that we've addressed today, we are really looking to meet with some of the stakeholders, particularly in that North Resilience Zone, the Harbor Towers, Long Wharf, Christopher Columbus Park area, Central Wharf of the Aquarium. We're really looking to meet with them over the next couple of months here to talk about, does it make sense for them to go it together or to go it alone, and what that means from the regulatory side of things across the board. So I'd say the next month or so in particular, if you have any thoughts in terms of advancing through the regulatory processes, that may inform how those various stakeholders come to the table and see partnering up versus tackling some of these issues separately.
Commissioner Sullivan, I would add that in terms of the first priority area that's being looked at by BPTA, Long Wharf, we share your concern that we'd be planning well for the future. So let's all of us keep our eyes out for making sure that we have the end goal in mind together.
Great. Commissioner Wilson, I was going to say maybe you and I could work on a draft of a letter to the other commissioners, really with the focus being on what Stephanie suggested at this point.
Yep, that makes sense.
You're up for it? Okay, awesome.
Okay.
Great. Commissioner Conan?
Thank you, Chair Parker. Exciting project indeed. A few quick questions. I know Chair Parker's trying to get to his 8 p.m. ferry.
That's all right. I can walk. I could use the steps today. Don't worry.
Sounds good. How long did it take to come up with this plan?
We've been working on, we've been working on it for about 2 years, the plan itself, but we were putting together the public-private partnership in advance of that and getting funding in the year or 18 months before that. So been at it a while.
So more than 3 years. If you were to replicate this for an adjacent neighborhood,
right,
that would presumably take less time?
Well, I do think that our friends from Arup and VHB have done a tremendous job at setting up a template, if you will, for how to go about looking at the alternatives. You know, the great thing that we did with them is that every single one of the property owners, for example, had an opportunity to look at all of the options, including do nothing for each of their properties. And so the effort was really comprehensive, and we set up a matrix for how to establish an evaluation criteria, set of evaluation criteria, so that people would be able to make the right decision. So I think there are a lot of aspects of what we've done that would be useful and applicable to other communities, and we absolutely are happy to share that with them.
That's wonderful. I think it's important to point out that value because, you know, we have to protect, as somebody said here, it has to work for everybody, right? And climate change isn't a regional issue or a local issue of any kind, it's a global issue. And if we're not all protected, then none of us are protected, as we saw in COVID. So that's good to know that there's a template and that can be shared with others, because if you multiply this problem by all the coastal cities, even within the US, think about the amount of money that needs to be raised and the amount of bonding that we need to do beyond the 30-year period.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious, what is your plan for what this doesn't happen?
We're not going there.
Okay.
Let's do.
And so what if you did successfully do this, but again, like Commissioner Sullivan, I'm not sure how the demarcations were done, but what if you did succeed, but the adjacent communities did not do anything?
So that's something I didn't have time to touch on, but the slides that we shared with you do show what we call resilience zones. So what we've done is we've broken the district up into 3 resilience zones. So the North Resilience Zone is Harbor Towers, Central Wharf, which is the aquarium, and Long Wharf in Christopher Columbus Park. The Central Zone is Rose Wharf. The Southern Resilience Zone is the areas south of Rose Wharf down into Fort Point Channel. Each resilience zone can be built by itself. There are spurs that come from the waterfront to high points inland that basically compartmentalize the district into 3 areas. Any one of them can be built by itself, and we don't need the abutting neighborhoods, the abutting resilience zones to come online. You've got protection day one as soon as one zone is built. And also it protects against a single point of failure. So if there's a single point of failure somewhere in the city, that flooding is contained within that resilience zone and isn't widespread throughout the city. So,
and I also want to point out that demarcation along Congress Street is just the demarcation of the Wharf District. The organization, not necessarily, we're not saying we'll protect up to here and not past that. That's just the organizational structure, not really the protection structure.
I see. That makes sense. Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. And
if we build those spurs that go back to have these 3 zones, we will be protecting $3.6 billion worth of public and private investment. So the rest of it, we hope they'll do as well, but just that will accomplish that goal.
Yeah, I guess
it may help to show that if it's not done, what is lost. It's important to put that number forward as well.
It's in the report. We just didn't have it.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So
also note, Ken, to your previous question, generally I would anticipate that we can repeat this process with other neighborhoods in 18 months. We're about to kick off one for the North End. Part of it, though, is how quickly they can receive funding to deliver the various aspects of it. So the funding might require it to take 24 months or longer, depending on how long that takes. So that's an important piece. We do have two presentations. One is specifically on the infrastructure that's being proposed for this plan. We have a separate presentation on the operating model that was employed for this project, and we are very open and willing to share that with any interested parties. So if you know anybody that needs to hear that, wants to hear that, we'd be happy to come and talk with them. And Mark, that's not on your dime. I'm happy to just go around and chat with folks whenever about, because it is an important message to get out. I think
we're actually taking that show on the road nationally, at hopefully at ULI in April and in New York. So we're trying to share it as broadly as possible.
That's great. That's great to hear. Yeah, thank you. So with I had a couple of other thoughts. One, because you highlighted how this is important for the public, I would consider having sort of radial access to water as opposed to the perimeter type access, because the harbor walk at some point, I mean, this as good as this plan is, it also has a design life. And beyond that, we don't know what happens, right? Because as you pointed out, this is just a preparation for adaptation. There is no mitigation going on here, maybe something else to think about to make the plan even more attractive, to say how these businesses and these residents are going to cut carbon by maybe buying into community choice electricity, 100% green or something. Because all this, you use the word the planet is doing this to us, but it's really people, right? It's us. And the more carbon we put in the atmosphere, the more the water goes up. So how do we stop that? It could be part of it, maybe something to consider. I know it's mitigation, and mixing that with adaptation is difficult, but given that it's a systemic issue, that may actually make things more attractive as you bring this proposal forward to other neighborhoods and even for this neighborhood. And back to just in terms of public access, it would be important to protect access to the waterfront. And for that, anything you can do in this plan to have radial access right to the water and back sort of thing, as opposed to harbor walk. The harbor walk, I think, may be unfortunately the first thing to go.
Well, one of the wonderful things is that we have the aquarium as one of our partners, and the aquarium is really committed to educating the public and using this as a model for the world to how to address these issues. If they're fully underwater, I don't know what we're going to do, but we're trying to make sure they don't.
Right. Yeah, this is very good. I'm looking forward to reading the full report and maybe have more questions later. Thank you for sharing.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Richmond.
Yeah, I'd also like to read the full report. And the one thing I am really struck by and really want to compliment the team on is that years ago in 2000, when I was involved in the Boston 2000, and we were trying to get these kinds of public-private partnerships, it was very difficult. And the fact that you seem to have done it and done it so successfully is really extraordinary. And I'm not particularly surprised that you probably are the only group doing this kind of work to be able to claim that. But it to the extent that you have this report, and the report can be shared with others, and the model particularly of the public-private partnership to address these issues is very, very exciting. So I thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Herbst.
I thank you as well for all your work on this and for getting a chance to hear about it. I was curious, and maybe this comes in the category of, well, we're going to be okay with it, but what about other folks? I'm wondering, I think you said you are yet to talk to state folks, but I'm wondering whether you've had conversations with CZM.
We have, yeah. So we've met with DEP Waterways, MEPA, CZM, and we're Boston Water and Sewer. And we are meeting with DEP Northeast office tomorrow. Yeah. So
I asked because
Army Corps.
I think I feel like there's a lot of history fairly consistent about resisting encroachment and fill along the shore, so.
Yep, there
I'm
is,
interested in that.
and one thing, unfortunately, when we met with CZM, their representative had to jump off early, and so we didn't get feedback, but MIPA did have a vague response of, oh, you know, you should, agencies have concerns and questions about placing fill. And that was as far, you know, I asked, is there a regulation that's an issue? And it was just very like amorphous. I don't know. I have this idea that it's a bad idea, and so you shouldn't do it. But we're gonna have to get past that.
Yeah. So, and I mean, I have my own, I don't have anything specific either, you know, it's not like I don't keep the the regulations memorized, but you know, I'd want to look at the land under the ocean language. You seem very confident about that, which surprised me. So maybe that will be good news. But
Yeah, there's not a limit the way there is for land under water bodies and waterways under the Wetlands Protection Act. Under 401, it's not a yes or no, it's just a different level of review if you're filling, you know, 5,000 square feet, more than 5,000 versus less than 5,000.
Yeah. And I'll just say, I guess, to the two Michaels, I'm a little leery about it. The devil's in the detail in permitting things, and I feel like the commission's gonna sometime, hopefully sooner rather than later, be asked to permit something specific related to this, and saying in advance that we're supportive seems tricky to me.
I thank you. I've thought about that. I think the way to do it is to, and we can talk about this offline. But I think the way to do it is to cite our regulations that, you know, are favorable to resiliency measures along the shoreline, and leave it at that. Not make any flat comments that, and should this project come before us, it's basically deemed approved, by virtue of this letter.
I think also, if you review the report, there is specifically a permitting memorandum that's attached to the appendix, and you could review that and see if you know how you feel about agreeing or disagreeing with it, and you know, you can be more specific about, you know, as it's presented that way, we would support it, knowing that it might not be that way in the future, and we can't say anything about, you know.
Yeah, it was good to, we ran that by CLF as well, and they had a similar kind of reaction to Stephanie, that they were in sync with what she had presented. So that's would be a good approach, Stephanie, I think.
Yeah, you could always say we don't hate this idea.
Right, exactly.
We're glad you're working on it. We don't hate it.
Is that what people say about the Northern Avenue Bridge dike?
Don't start now, come on.
But Commissioner Herbst, don't worry, I have plenty of qualifying caveats that I can put into any letter.
All right.
At my disposal.
We're counting on it.
Yeah. And I will note, because the report up on the Wharf District Council's website is long, I forget the number of pages, it's nearing 200. Their VHB specifically has 2 memorandums that are included in there, I believe, as appendices, where Stephanie has done, I think, a fabulous job going through and talking about, you know, the interpretation of this project against those regulations. So those would probably be where you'd want to take a look.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
Okay.
Nothing more for me.
Good, thank you. Okay, Elena, did you have anything to add?
Nothing beyond what's already been shared, but I'm sure that I'm going to have questions come up. It was really great to be able to hear more about this project, though. So thank you.
Great. Okay. So thank you very much for coming in and spending your evening with us. We appreciate it, and looking forward to a continued collaboration here.
Absolutely. Happy New Year.
You.
Okay, Happy New Year.
Thank you all for your time, and Happy New Year.
Okay, last item on the agenda is acceptance of meeting minutes from September 6th, 2023 and December 13th, 2023. I've reviewed them. I made a few edits. So with that, I would entertain a motion to accept the meeting minutes.
So moved.
Wow, 2.
Second.
That's the last one you hear for the year, so enjoy it.
It was great, John. You did a good job.
Wow. Okay. And we got a second. Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Long?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Commissioner Conan?
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond?
Aye.
Commissioner Herbst?
Aye.
And I vote aye. That carries 7-0. And with that, oh, just one other thing. I don't know if everybody saw it, but DEP did come out with their LSCFS regulations, long awaited. They've been in the works for several years, actually. Comment period ends sometime in March. But I think everybody has seen them, so I would encourage you to at least read an overview or a summary and become familiar with them. And certainly, if you have any comments, feel free to send your comments to DEP. So with that, I guess we can adjourn by acclamation.
No, let me make that motion though, and then we can really be done.
Please do. Please do.
Okay, so moved.
Thank you. I'm going to run to the vote. Okay. Good night,
Goodbye.
everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
New Year.